today from the 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 4, called Ambarish Maharaj Offended by Durvasa Muni. And we'll start with the Sanskrit verse that's on the board. Saitam Bhakti Yogena Tapo Yuktena Parthiva Swadharmena Harim Prinan Sarvan Kaman Shanayurjaho Saitam Bhakti Yogena Tapo Yuktena Parthiva Swadharmena Harim Prinan Sarvan Kaman Shanayurjaho Saitam Bhakti Yogena Tapo Yuktena Parthiva Swadharmena Harim Prinan Sarvan Kaman Shanayurjaho
Sahitam Bhakti Yogena
Saitam Bhakti Yogena
Tapo Yuktena Parthiva Swadharmena Harim Prinan Sarvan Kaman Shanayurjaho
Sahitam Bhakti Yogena
Saitam Bhakti Yogena
Tapo Yuktena Parthiva Swadharmena Harim Prinam Sarvam Kaman Shanayurjaho
Ladies?
Saitam
Saitam Bhakti Yogena Tapo Yuktena Parthiva Swadharmena Harim Prinan Sarvan
Sahitam Bhakti Yogena
Tapo Yuktena
Parthiva Swadharmena Harim Prinan Sarvan Kaman Shanayurjaho.
Okay, so the word for word translation, Saha He Ambarish Maharaj Itam in this way Bhakti Yogena by performing transcendental loving service to the Lord. Tapa Yuktena, which is simultaneously the best process of austerity. Parthivaha, the king. Swadharmena, by his constitutional activity. Harim, unto the Supreme Lord. Prinan, satisfying. Sarvan, all varieties of. Kaman, material desires. Shanai, gradually. Jaho, gave up. So the translation and purport to this verse are by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. The king of this planet, Maharaj Ambarish, thus performed devotional service to the Lord, and in this endeavor practiced severe austerity, always satisfying the Supreme Personality of Godhead by his constitutional activities, he gradually gave up all material desires. Purport. Severe austerities in the practice of devotional service are of many varieties. For example, in worshipping the deity in the temple, there are certainly laborious activities. Shri Vigraharadhana Nityanana Shringaratan Mandira Marjanado. One must decorate the deity, cleanse the temple, bring water from the Ganges and Yamuna, continue the routine work, perform arati many times, prepare first-class food for the deity, prepare dresses, and so on. In this way, one must constantly be engaged in various activities, and the hard labor involved is certainly an austerity. Similarly, the hard labor involved in preaching, preparing literature, preaching to atheistic men, and distributing literature door to door is of course an austerity, tapo yuktena, tapo divyam putrika. Such austerity is necessary. Yena sattvam shuddhyet. By such austerity and devotional service, one is purified of material existence. Kaman shanayar jaho. Indeed, such austerity leads one to the constitutional position of devotional service. In this way, one can give up material desires, and as soon as one is freed from material desires, he is free from the repetition of birth and death, old age, and disease. So before speaking on this verse and purport, we'll just recite a few invocation prayers to invite the blessings of the previous acharyas to empower us to be able to say something valuable about these verses. Om Ajnana Timirantasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sagana Raguna Tanvitam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Cha. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I'd like to beg the blessings of all the Vaishnavas assembled today, that by your mercy I can say something that's faithful to the line of disciplic succession from which we've received these teachings, and that will be beneficial for myself and for everyone, pleasant and beneficial for everyone present to hear. So I'll just repeat the verse one last time. The king of this planet, Maharaj Ambarish, thus performed devotional service to the Lord, and in this endeavor practiced severe austerity. Always satisfying the Supreme Personality of Godhead by his constitutional activities, he gradually gave up all material desires. So, in this chapter we're hearing about Maharaj Ambarish, and we just heard a few verses ago how he was very exemplary in carrying out devotional service, or bhakti yoga. And we heard about how bhakti yoga involves doing many things with one's mind, one's senses, using one's sense of touch, sense of smell, sense of taste, one's sight, and how even though he's a king who's involved in the daily administration of affairs, we're learning here that he was actually the king of this entire planet at this time. Still, he was considered a great yogi. He didn't leave human society to go into the mountains and meditate in isolation. He remained in his kingly position, and yet he gained perfect control over his senses by practicing bhakti yoga. So one of the first things we hear in the verse and the purport today is how Ambarish Maharaj, in the course of performing this devotional service, this bhakti yoga, he practiced severe austerity. And Prabhupada describes in the purport how there are many different kinds of austerity that we encounter in the course of doing bhakti yoga, in the course of performing devotional service. We're doing so many things to worship the deities. We clean the temple is cleaned every day. So much cooking goes on to feed for the pleasure of the deities and also for the devotees to have the meals that they need every day. And in all these activities, there's hard labor, and this hard labor is certainly on us. And so actually this kind of hard labor, we actually find it in every sphere of life. Everybody in this world, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that one cannot even maintain one's own body without performing some kind of work or some kind of labor. And so we find this labor also in devotional life. We find that there's austerities. But in spiritual life, we're very fortunate that we get to perform, we get to accept whatever hardships there are in life, whatever hardships we encounter over the course of our life activities, maintaining ourselves, maintaining the temple, maintaining our families. We get to perform all of these things for a very satisfying end, an end that actually gives nourishment to the soul. One of the essential verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam that we find in the first canto is Savai Pumsam Paro Dharmo Yato Bhaktir Dokshaje Ahaitu Kaprati Hata Yayatma Supersediti, which essentially says that the highest perfection of religion is to perform devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, and when such service is without personal motive and without interruption, then it actually completely satisfies the self. And also in the Bhagavad Gita, we hear a description of devotional service. Krishna says that it is susukam kartumavyayam, that the performing of all these services for Krishna and for Krishna's devotees is very joyfully performed. It's a very happy affair. And so one might be a little disappointed to find that in taking shelter of Krishna consciousness, one still encounters some hard labor, some austerities to perform. Maybe one was thinking that, if I join the Krishna consciousness movement, I can escape the hard labor of whatever difficult job I may be working in the world. And then one may feel disappointed that I still find, I have to do some hard labor for Krishna also. But nevertheless, this hard labor is actually very satisfying. And I remember I was visiting New York City for a few days, and I found a place to stay about an hour away from the temple. It takes about an hour by the subway to get to the Bhakti Center. So I was looking forward to going to the morning program. The early morning program starts at 4:30 in the morning. And but because I had to take a 1 hour metro train to get to the temple, I had to rise very early. I had to get up at maybe 2:30, 2:45, get myself ready, get out the door, walk to the subway station, take an hour train there. So I had to get up very early. And I was actually surprised when I got to the subway station, because I thought I was going to be the only one there on the platform. But actually, there was already quite a few other people who were already there waiting for the train, the same train that I was waiting for. And it struck me that these people are here because they have to get up this early in order to get their train, just to go to their work, to go to their job. And I was surprised to find that people were waking up so early, because it's such an austerity to wake up so early, 3 o'clock in the morning, something like that. And when the train came, I saw that there were even more people already on the train. And then as we were going in to Manhattan, at each stop, more and more people were coming in. And I felt a kind of sympathy for these people, because wow, I've woken up so early, I've done this austerity, but I get to actually go to the temple of Krishna and then just wait to see the curtains open, and then I get to behold these very beautiful forms of the Lord, which are so pleasing to the eyes. And then in the association of devotees who are such sweet and pleasant people, I get to join with them and sing Krishna's names, sing the holy names of God, and we're dancing together, and dancing is such a pleasant form of recreation, especially here in the temple, and there's such a nice atmosphere, there's the smell of incense, and I get to spend this time. I've performed some austerity to wake up and get on the train, but I get to reap the benefits of that austerity in the form of this spiritual contact, which is very nourishing to the soul. And so I was feeling some sympathy that all these people, they perform the same, people I'm sharing this metro train with, they perform the same austerities, the same difficulty of waking up. But they're actually on this train just to go to probably perform some job that they're not very enthusiastic about, and that it may be actually quite painful for them painful and tiring for them to go to this job every day. So they're performing an unpleasant austerity just to go to a place that's unpleasant and do something that's unpleasant. And then so I felt, how fortunate am I that actually everybody's performing austerity. It's not just me. I felt I was the only one, everybody else is sleeping in, they're enjoying so nicely. I have to wake up and go to the temple. But actually so many others are doing the same austerity, but I'm so fortunate because I get to just go and see the beautiful face of Krishna and sing and dance in the association of his devotees. So Prabhupada, I remember in one purport that I read some time back, Prabhupada was talking about austerity, and contrasting it with the mood of seeking, moving about the world in a way that I'm looking for some enjoyment for myself, looking to find some happiness, looking to have some pleasant experience, maybe sitting in a cafe and sipping on some pleasant warm beverage and just kind of enjoying the scene, or maybe going to the movies, or maybe so many different ways. Prabhupada says that actually when one takes up this path of just moving about the world, seeking something pleasant for myself, they actually invite a really miserable result on themselves. The result is not what they were expecting, not what they were hoping for. This is elaborated on in the verse in the Bhagavad Gita. Yehi samsparshaja bhoga dukha yonaya evate adyantavanta kaunteya nateshu ramate buddha. This verse explains how the particular kind of happiness that one gets when one reaches out with one's senses to try and touch some sense object, whether it's reaching out with the eyes to touch something visually beautiful, or reaching out with one's skin to feel something that feels nice. Actually, that is simply a source of suffering in this world. And he explains that all such so-called pleasure that one experiences from that, it has a beginning and a middle and an end. There's a point at which it starts, and then one feels some sensation, and then there's a point at which that sensation comes to an end. And this is actually a very disappointing situation, because we don't want temporary happiness. We don't want happiness for 17 seconds or for 37 minutes or for a few hours. We have this feeling of always wanting to be in a condition of happiness. So by seeking to be happy, by just touching the things of this world with our senses, we're setting ourselves up for disappointment. And the ultimate explanation for this is actually because matter and spirit are just too different from one another. We're actually spiritual beings, and everything in this world that we can touch is material. It's made of matter, and matter is not eternal, and therefore it's always changing its shape, and it's not eternal. You can't keep it with you. You may have a house for some time, or a car for some time, and you may have a partner, a spouse for some time, but there's no guarantee for how long you're going to be able to enjoy that house or that car or that person. And eventually, as one reaches old age and death, one is obligated to give everything up. And then, so this is a very awkward and incompatible situation for the soul, because the soul is a spiritual being who is eternal by nature, and everything material is by nature temporary. And therefore, any feeling of happiness we can derive from material objects is also temporary. And so, basically, at the end of the day, spirit and matter are just too different. They're not a good fit for each other. Matter can't bring happiness to a spiritual being. And so, Krishna says that because the great sages, the persons of intelligence, they recognize that material happiness has a beginning and an end, and it won't satisfy them, that it's only going to bring them disappointment and suffering, then they don't take pleasure in that kind of happiness. They don't seek pleasure in that kind of happiness. And so this is why Prabhupada was saying, don't go looking for happiness for yourself. Don't go looking for pleasure for yourself. This actually brings a very disappointing and depressing result for the living being. And then he speaks about austerity. However, if on the other hand we voluntarily agree to give up some of our pleasures, some of our feelings of contentment or comfort, in order to please Krishna, in order to please Krishna, who is the supreme personality of Godhead, which means he's our original divine source. Prabhupada makes a very reassuring statement. He simply says, everything will be okay. if you simply give up this search for pleasure for your senses, and you try to please Krishna's senses instead, and you accept whatever austerity or hardship is required for that, then actually the result is that everything will be okay, everything will be all right. So, the next point is we were hearing how Ambarish Maharaj is performing devotional service in order to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, and that by doing this he gave up all material desires. So although we do austerities in devotional service, we don't do dry austerities quite the same way as many renunciates would do. Often they're referred to as jnanis, those who renounce the world, and they may perform many difficult austerities in the Himalayan mountains, some mountain range somewhere, some area in the forest away from society. They try to perform different kinds of austerities to detach themselves from the body. They might sit in freezing cold water in the middle of winter, just in order to control the senses and detach themselves from the idea that I am this body. Or they may sit in the middle of a ring of fire in the middle of summer when the heat is already sweltering, in order to try and control the senses. And we hear in this chapter about Ambarish Maharaj that he also has perfect control of the senses, but he's not doing anything like that. He's engaging his senses in devotional service. He's using his feet to go to the temple. He's using his head to bow before the Lord in the temple. He's using his nose to smell the tulsi leaves offered to the Lord and smell the incense offered to the Lord. He's using his tongue to taste the Lord's prasadam. He's using his sense of touch to touch the bodies of the devotees, dance with devotees. And so it may be surprising to some that a person can stay so involved in the world and be a yogi, be somebody who's got control over their senses and control over their mind. And I'd like to read a couple extracts from a couple of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's writings. Bhaktivinoda Thakur is one of the spiritual masters in our disciplic succession. And he writes, this is a small excerpt from an essay where he's talking about atyahara, which is overeating or overindulgence of the senses. And he describes how this atyahara, which is one of the things that's unfavorable for devotional service, it doesn't just mean overeating, like overeating food, but he describes how this word eating, ahara, is actually representative of all the different ways that one can enjoy through the senses. So like the eyes like to eat something visual, the ears like to eat something, some music or something of that nature. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, although bhojana, or eating, is the principal meaning of the word ahara, the word bhojana also means to enjoy the objects of the five senses: form by the eyes, sound by the ears, smell by the nose, taste by the tongue, feeling of heat and cold, soft and hard by the touch. In this way, the five senses enjoy. And then Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, this type of material enjoyment is compulsory for an embodied soul. Without enjoying the sense objects, a living entity cannot survive. As soon as the living entity gives up sense enjoyment, he leaves his body. Therefore, giving up sense enjoyment is only a figment of the imagination, and it can never be applied in practice. So this is a really interesting statement, because it actually gives indication that it's not only when a spirit soul is conditioned by a material body He wants to experience some pleasure, but actually it's the nature of the soul to experience pleasure. And it's not only when the conditioned soul is in the body that he wants to be active and cultivate relationships with people and engage in all kinds of activities. It's actually the nature of the soul to be active and to seek pleasure. And therefore, if a spirit soul embodied in a conditioned soul doesn't have any pleasure in his life, doesn't have any sense enjoyment, then he has no choice but to leave the body. The body's not considered inhabitable anymore. And so it's actually part of the nature of the soul that no one can stop doing something, not even for a moment. And therefore one who restrains the senses of action, but their mind dwells on the same sense objects, they delude themselves, and Krishna refers to them as a pretender in the Bhagavad Gita. So this is the result if I withdraw myself from the world and withdraw myself from all the sense objects, and I try to just perform dry austerities and not engage my senses at all, then actually the result will be that within my mind I'll just keep enjoying the same things. Outside it'll appear that I'm very renounced, but on the inside, within my mind, I'll still be thinking, meditating on the same sense objects, the same activities I used to do, the same relationships I used to have with my father, my friends, girlfriends or boyfriends. And so it produces a kind of false renunciation, a kind of, the person's actually deluding themselves. And so what is the, what is the real process for controlling the senses and the mind in a way that's actually sustainable for the soul? We hear in another essay by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he mentions, so he mentions that there are 5 kinds of attachments. Being attracted to the sense objects, the mind runs towards them. One eats with the tongue, smells with the nose, hears with the ears, feels with the skin, and sees with the eyes. We already heard that. And the mind of the conditioned soul is always attached to some sense object. So then Bhaktivinoda Thakur asks, what power can detach the mind from the objects of the senses? Although dry impersonal speculation could be helpful to some extent in this matter, still, due to the passive nature of impersonal Brahman, that's the impersonal, all-pervading aspect of the Supreme, the worshipper is unable to get complete strength. Therefore, the jnanis and the yogis face so many difficulties. In devotional service, there are no difficulties. The lives of Krishna's devotees are not separated from Brahman. Material attachment and spiritual attachment on this path are non-different. When the mind wants to see the sense object through the eyes, good. Let it see the indescribable beauty of the deity. In this case, material enjoyment and spiritual enjoyment are the same. You want to hear? Then hear the songs and talks that glorify Krishna. Do you like to eat palatable dishes? Then offer all types of tasty dishes to Lord Krishna and accept the prasad. To smell, there is the tulsi and sandalwood pulp, which was offered to the Lord. Like this, all objects are spiritualized for the practitioner of Krishna consciousness. One who executes Krishna consciousness is always merged in spiritual existence. All of his activities enhance his spiritual attachment. For him, the activities of the senses are not impediments, rather they are the means of attaining love of God. So that last statement is basically like sums up how powerful Bhakti Yoga is. That instead of seeing the senses as just impediments or obstacles, one uses the current of attraction that's already present in the senses and just tries to channel that current of attraction towards Krishna, and it's a much more natural process because that impulse, that attraction is already there. The impulse to have to go to restaurants and have really nice varieties of food is already there. So in spiritual life, we can cook all kinds of varieties of foods and offer it to Krishna, and it becomes even more relishable because it becomes spiritualized. It becomes actually transformed into spiritual substance, and it becomes non-different from Krishna himself. So then we're actually associating with the Supreme just by taking this food, which is also very pleasant for the senses to take. And so in this way, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that our material attachment becomes no different from spiritual attachment. It becomes transformed. We blur the lines between the two of them, and then we use that material force to actually bring spiritual good into our life. And this is the main lesson that we usually hear from Maharaj Ambarish, how he's an exemplary bhakti yogi in that manner. And so I think I'll go ahead and stop here. So we spoke about how Maharaj Ambarish is performing austerity, and that everybody some way or another has to perform austerity in this world, but we can actually find satisfaction for our soul, for our very self, our true self, when we perform that austerity for Krishna's pleasure. And that becoming a spiritualist or becoming an advanced yogi is actually most naturally done, not by trying to artificially control the senses, but by engaging the senses in the natural process of devotional service, by which we spiritualize them by engaging them in all sorts of activities. So now I'll open it up for anybody who'd like to give a reflection or comment or any kind of, if you have a question, I'll do my best to try and answer. So does anybody have anything they'd like to add? Yes, Bhakti Evan Prabhu.
How do we find a balance between doing austerities for the pleasure of the soul and don't forget the body?
Okay. So how do we find balance between performing austerities for the soul, but then basically in a way that we don't neglect the body? There's a song by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the same author we just read from, where he says, Manasa deho geho more ye kichu more. I can't remember that. Nandakishore. Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying, Manasa deho geho. So my mind, my body, my house, my home, my family life, everything belongs to you, Krishna. And anything that I have, whether gross or subtle, it belongs to you. So my car, my home, my office, or my mind, my intelligence, they all belong to Krishna. And so seeing things in this way, we understand that everything is meant to be engaged in Krishna service. If I think that it belongs to me, then I think that I can do anything that I want with it. So, for example, if I think that a particular car belongs to me, then I'm free to just take it whenever I want and go here and there as I like, and go to the clubs, go to the mountains, go wherever I like, whenever I like. I can use it for my enjoyment. And also I might think, if it's mine, then I'm free to destroy it. So if I want to engage in some maybe dangerous street racing, drive recklessly, or spill things all over the inside of the car, then I'm free to do that because it's mine. So if I see something as being mine, then I'm free to both enjoy it or I'm free to destroy it, however I see fit. But if I see that car as belonging to, if I see everything as belonging to Krishna, then naturally I must engage it for Krishna's pleasure. And whenever you borrow the car of a friend, you'll probably find that you feel a lot more attentive and careful about how you drive it. Because, oh, this isn't my car, I don't have the right to drive recklessly with it. And if I want to take it somewhere, I know I have to ask them first. I have to ask their permission. So similarly, when we see that this body belongs to this body of mine, it's actually Krishna's property, then I'll think, oh, it's neither mine to enjoy nor to destroy, but I should just engage it in Krishna's service. And just as a car, in order to be used in Krishna's service, needs to regularly have its oil changed, and maybe the windshield needs to be replaced from time to time, or the headlights need to be replaced. So similarly, and if I don't do that, then the car will break down and I can't use it in Krishna's service anymore. And similarly with this body, if we don't give it the right kind of diet, if we don't give it the amount of rest that it needs, and then this body may also break down and be unusable or difficult to use in Krishna's service. So in the first canto, we hear that life's desires, the natural desires that we feel in life, they should not be used just for cultivating sense gratification recklessly, but they should be used for just cultivating a healthy lifestyle that allows us to keep body and soul together as needed. And that's actually one of the first verses that we find in the Bhagavatam. It's in the second chapter called Divinity and Divine Service. And if you read this chapter, you'll find so many verses that Prabhupada quotes again and again in his classes. So it's, even if you've never read this chapter before, but you've heard Prabhupada's classes or read other books by Prabhupada, you should find that, oh, so many of these verses, I feel like I already know them. And this is one of those, this is in the same grouping as those verses, so it's quite an important verse. And so yeah, it describes the principle that there's nothing wrong with desiring a healthy lifestyle and desiring to keep body and soul together in a nice congruent manner. But one shouldn't overdo it and be too lavishly concerned with taking care of the body, that one distracts oneself in spiritual life. That's the idea. So yeah, there's a little ingest kind of response to your question. I hope that's okay. Is there anything else? All right. Thank you very much for your attentive hearing. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Shantatma Prabhu ki.
Jai Shri. Every living being in this world is a combination of spirit and matter. So the spirit soul is situated in the heart of each material body, and is compared driver of the car.
Okay.
So, and the body is the car. So the vehicle that we're temporarily in right now is made out of matter. It's made out of material elements. And then, but you could say that the person who's actually operating that vehicle is spiritual, is fully spiritual. And the consciousness of the soul pervades the body and makes it alive. And so when we talk about, for example, somebody's, let's say, attachment to their father or attachment to a partner or something being material, it means their attachment for the body. It means their attachment for the bodily relationship, because that particular body has come into being at a particular point in time, and then
Ça va, t'as pas besoin de traduction, t'arrives à suivre.
Oui, j'arrive aussi, c'est bon. Merci.
yeah, so like for example, why do we call somebody our father? We call somebody our father because my body came from his body. So his material body produced this material body. But our residence in these bodies is temporary, and it's quite possible that in a previous lifetime we were just friends. And maybe in a future lifetime he'll be my boss and I'll be his employee or something like that. So the relationship is, the attachment to the relationship is on a material basis.